Welcome to our session today, CVI Roadmap for Understanding, where we're centering CVI voices and current research. We're talking about assessment and advocacy. And again, thank you so much for being here after a full and wonderful day of learning. I am Rachel Bennett, the Assistant Director for CVI Now and Parent Advocacy and Support at the CVI Center at Perkins. It's a really exciting time to be here at Perkins. And I'm also CVI parent to Henry, who's 9. So I'm going to share my screen and get this up and going. Is that good? Hopefully.
It's good.
Thank you. I still don't trust it after how long has it been? 2 years? Okay. So for the next hour or so, the focus of our conversation will be about what we're learning from kids and teenagers and adults with CVI. I'm going to share some highlights from current research and why research is so important to our advocacy as parents and professionals. Highlights from the CVI Now IEP guide. I know you just had a lot of questions about the IEP process, so we have some resources for you. We're then going to move into a live conversation with me and 2 other CVI parents, Burju Sari and Lacey Smith. And then we're going to close out our session today hearing from Marguerite Tabarro and Ellen Maisel about considerations for essential assessment for individuals with CVI. So before we dive in, let's go back to this foundational question. What is CVI? And according to CVI, individuals with CVI and their families, current research and educators, we know that CVI is a brain-based visual impairment caused by damage to the visual pathways or visual processing areas of the brain. CVI is the leading cause of blindness in children, and so much more research continues to support this. Individuals with CVI struggle with visual attention, being able to look at something, and visual recognition, being able to understand what you were looking at, resulting in a lack of access to and understanding of the world around them. CVI is lifelong. It's lifelong. Research shows us that the brain is able to live wire and build connections, right? Neuroplasticity. There is potential for improvement of functional vision for some individuals with CVI, and with visual access, some can use their vision. But CVI is always going to be there, and it's always going to be an ongoing need. And this last one is really important. All manifestations of CVI are a big deal for the individual. They're a big deal, all manifestations. It's not up to sighted individuals to make assumptions about the extent to which an individual with CVI, is impacted. Every individual CVI has a different lived experience, and CVI doesn't look one way or a certain way. It's a big, complex condition. It's critical that we infuse a disability rights lens when we're working with and serving and collaborating with individuals with CVI. And this is something that I'm working on, right? I really need to check my ableist lens at the door. And it's something that I've been able to bring to my relationship to my son, with my son, Henry, and it's been totally game-changing. It's up to the individual with CVI to define their own success and to live the life they want. It's about providing every opportunity for them to be fully empowered and for them to learn all the skills they need for access, right? CVI is on the blindness spectrum, and what are all the skills our heterogeneous population of CVI, individual CVI need to be fully successful and fully access the life, their world and their life on their own terms, right? It's about autonomy and agency and choice. So every individual with CVI, every individual's lived experience is different. Some see the world as a swirling mass of color, light, and movement that is incomprehensible and overwhelming. We're hearing from individuals with CVI that talk about how vision can seem like they're hallucinating, or it's really frightening and scary. Some can focus at times, but still may struggle to understand what they see. Many shut out the world altogether and avoid looking at objects and people, even with their own parents, because it's so difficult to make sense of their surroundings. And I see this with Henry every day. Others might appear to have learning difficulties or become anxious in new environments. Some use a white cane to navigate safely in their environment and communities. Many experience CVI meltdowns due to fatigue brought on by too many competing sensory inputs. CVI and fatigue can happen every day. And again, I see this with Henry. So let's lean in and listen to some CVI voices. Here's what we're learning from individuals with CVI. Individuals with CVI are the experts of their own brain. Vision is not passive, it's hard work. Vision is unreliable. Vision can be affected by both internal, what's going on inside the body, how you're feeling, and external states and stimuli, everything that's going on around the environment around you. There are many ways to access information. It's not just about vision. Compensatory skills do not take away from vision use, and self-advocacy and self-acceptance is critical. So let's dig deeper and keep learning. Nye is an adult with CVI and the author of an incredible blog called the CVI Perspective. You can also find Nye's story on CVINow.org. On the left, you'll see a picture of Nye wearing sunglasses, holding their cane, enjoying the sunshine outside. Nye says, vision alone never came into focus by itself. It had to be buttressed by something non-visual. The lesson in CVI isn't about seeing or not seeing. It's about a much deeper principle, autonomy and choice. What CVI folks need are options and the freedom to choose. What we need is respect as the experts of our own brains. Here is Dagbort, an adult with CVI who is an opera singer and in graduate school studying music. You can find her story on CVI Now. Here she is smiling, holding a pink rose after one of her concerts. Dagbort says, when I'm rested and happy, I see clearly except for the visual field loss. My acuity is fine. But when I have visual fatigue, it's like looking through a straw. I have extremely limited visual field. It gets all fuzzy. I'm also not able to recognize what I was just looking at. Touch helps me recognize it again. I get almost blind when I'm tired. And Nicola McDowell is a researcher and an educator and an adult with CVI. She has a great blog on CVI Scotland. I'm sure many of you have read it so far. And she says, when in busy, cluttered classrooms when she was in school, she wrote, this clutter combined with the overload of other sensory information, such as the constant noise, movement, and smells of a classroom full of students, meant that I spent the whole school day feeling anxious and on edge. Being in these cluttered environments was also exhausting, and I soon learned that the only way I was going to survive each day was if I allowed myself some quiet time during break times. These solitary timeouts ended up becoming one of my most important strategies for dealing with the anxiety, confusion, and fatigue my visual issues created. In our CVI Now Parent Facebook group, there's a lot of discussion about the physical and emotional impact of CVI and fatigue, how it can cause nausea and vomiting and dizziness and migraines and headaches and pain, along with anxiety and confusion and fear and trauma. And it's really important that we understand the physical and emotional symptoms of navigating fatigue that comes with CVI. And you can learn so much more about CVI and fatigue on CVI Now. Here's Aiden. He's a teenager with CVI in high school. On CVI Now, you can find a whole video playlist of Aiden answering questions during his CVI assessment. And here's a still shot of Aiden sitting in the evaluation room. Aiden shares, when I look at things with a lot of different colors, it kind of plays tricks on my eyes. It can get annoying that it takes a while for me to figure out what something is or where something is. That's so teenagers speak. It is annoying. If an object was mixed in with a bunch of things, yeah, I could figure it out, but it'd be harder to recognize what I'm looking for. My eyes get tired looking at things that move. My eyes go crazy. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about motion processing later. Here's Grace, and you'll see images of her reading in large text super close to the computer, and then one where she's wearing pink headphones, holding a device while relaxing on a comfy chair. She's an elementary school student with CVI. Her mom, Jessica, wrote a wonderful article found on CVINow.org about how Grace has become such a voracious reader thanks to audiobooks. Here's how Grace describes what it feels like when she has to read print. When I read, it feels like my eyes are being pulled out from their centers. I have a hard time reading long passages like when we have the end of grade tests because my eyes get tired after about 2 paragraphs. A weird thing about this is I never get tired when I read numbers. This does not stop me from reading lots of audiobooks. Here's Tina. She's a photographer and an artist, an adult with CVI who is attending a college of art. You can see her photography and her story on CVI Now. Tina says, I have facial blindness, depth perception issues, spatial blindness, and nighttime blindness. I don't know where I'm going a lot of the time. CVI is unpredictable. Some days are clearer than others. Today I woke up and my vision is off. My nystagmus likes to work with my CVI to make seeing sometimes impossible. Tina's so great. Here's Krish. He has a great video on CVI Now giving a presentation about his CVI to his class. In this image, Chris is at a roller rink wearing a bright red shirt. Such a great photo. Krish said, I have trouble seeing some faces, trouble seeing things farther away. I have trouble seeing in crowded areas. When there's a lot of action and sound happening around me, I can get overwhelmed and it can be hard to use my vision. Sometimes it's hard for me to catch balls fast and keep up with running. And here's my son, Henry, who has found a little bit of newfound advocacy. For the past few years, he's had an increase in really severe migraine episodes, which includes intense cyclic vomiting. Here's an image of him just showing his big smile and wearing a cozy pink sweatshirt, right? Kind of his usual state if he's not tired. And then one of him sleeping in the middle of a really long migraine episode. Hopefully he'll forgive me someday for putting up that picture. Because he's had so much experience with this, he's learning to advocate for himself. He has a speech delay and it's hard for him to verbalize how he's feeling. And he's now able to say, he's come up to able to tell me, turn off the lights. I need dark room time. I can't see it's blurry. I can't see it's dark. I can only see your teeth. And when behavior is your only voice, you know, we see behaviors and we need to truly, like deeply in our bones, understand that behavior is communication, always. So you might see when there's no access or when fatigue is coming, resting head and hands, looking away, pushing all items out of view, asking for a snack or preferred activity, running away, needs to move the body, walking to the corner of the room, right, to escape clutter or noise or something, closing eyes and appear to be sleeping, head down and goes to sleep, fidgets and plays with objects near them, needs hugs, holds hands, stays close. This is Henry. Yells, grabs, or shows other outward behaviors. Banging on the table to make items move. Talks, sings, or tells jokes to change the interaction to an auditory event. And these are just some examples. So it's really important then, as observers, as parents, as educators, as providers, to be careful observers and consistently strive to fully understand what the behavior is communicating and what access is needed. So I'm going to shift to some highlights from current research. CVI Now has a big CVI Research Library where you can find current research related to CVI, the brain, and the visual system. It's something that we constantly update. It's important that we continue to follow the science and the research because it's really critical to our advocacy and moving the field forward. Research helps us advocate for that early diagnosis, effective vision services, and accessible educational programs. Too many individuals with CVI are falling through the cracks. Too many are not getting the medical care, services, and educational programming they need to fully thrive. It should not matter how CVI manifests, and it should not matter the zip code. All individuals with CVI have a right to life-changing access and services. It's important to note that the National Eye Institute at the National Institutes for Health set CVI as a research priority in their strategic plan. This is a really big deal for the CVI community, which means more funding and awareness is going towards CVI. And a recent study from the UK shows that 1 in 30 elementary school students in mainstream classrooms have a CVI-related vision difficulty. So we're starting to see more and more prevalence data around CVI. It's the leading cause of childhood blindness, and more data is showing this. Current research shows us an evolving understanding of the diverse manifestations of CVI. Using research from multiple sources and perspectives can support our advocacy needs with school teams and districts, along with local, state, and national leaders. And here's a picture of Henry touching a computer screen that shows an article about the prevalence of CVI in genetic conditions. And so in the CVI Research Library, we have many different topics of current research, causes and conditions associated with CVI. We're seeing new research that shows associated conditions of CVI that include cerebral palsy. I think the percentage is anywhere between 60 and 70% prevalence. Williams syndrome, autism spectrum disorder, Down syndrome, CDKL5 deficiency disorder, Rett syndrome, and a whole host of genetic syndromes and variants. Lots of research on the impact of clutter and the difficulty with visual search. Clutter is public enemy number one for CVI. The world we live in is clutter for CVI. A lot on visual attention and recognition, and some research about the integration of dorsal and ventral visual pathways. This new research tells us that we need to approach visual access and support visual skills from a much more holistic and integrated perspective. Because we used to think that the dorsal stream and the ventral stream kind of work separately together, right? The dorsal stream is your where pathway, understanding where things are in space and your vision for action. The ventral stream is your what pathway that helps you recognize objects. It's your visual library. But we're seeing more and more that there's a highly intricate network in between the two streams, and they need each other to function. And so this new research really shows us then that the CVI visual behaviors are always at play in every situation. This is why CVI is so complex, and it's so important that we really just strive to fully understand all individuals with CVI. And you're going to learn more about CVI behaviors and assessment from Marguerite and Ellen later. Sorry, I'm getting a little excited talking about research. Okay, so we also have research about global motion processing. This past year, I've learned so much about motion processing from research. It's so much more than just a need for slow movement to gain visual attention. Motion processing is really complex, and it requires the integration of many areas and systems in the brain and our visual system. It's a huge part of how we access our world. So many with CVI have difficulty with motion processing, accessing the speed and direction of a moving object, right? Biological motion, how people move, body language, movement of facial expressions. It's a big deal, and I'm really excited to continue to learn more. Lots of great research about processing facial expressions and emotions. Access to people is a huge difficulty. And then research on CVI and ocular conditions. Many individuals also have eye conditions like optic nerve issues or like nystagmus or strabismus. And researchers are really starting to figure out what clinical assessment can look like with current tools they have, because we know there's a critical need for medical community to figure out how to diagnose CVI. So slowly but surely, they're starting to figure that out. And here you see some screenshots of the research library on CVI Now. And I want to take a moment to highlight, there's this great book by David Eagleman called Livewired, The Inside Story of the Ever-Changing Brain. And there's so much that he covers, but this quote really stands out to me and others on the CVI team. All sensory, it turns out that all sensory inputs support brain development, right? So it turns out that it doesn't matter how the information gets to the brain, as long as it gets there. Whatever information the brain is fed will learn to adjust to it and extract what it can, as long as the data reflects something important about the outside world. Development has to be rooted in the meaningful multisensory learning in daily routines. The brain, the sensory systems are highly connected. For my son specifically, he's able to access his vision when he's able to engage with whatever he's engaging with tactilely. That just jumpstart his visual system. So you never know what access can look like for the individual. Multisensory learning is so important. And so it's all about this access to learning, right? Visual skills are not a prerequisite for learning and access. With comprehensive and integrated assessment and accessible educational programming, individuals with CVI can learn to access their world in the way that works best for them. Some use visual skills, some use compensatory strategies, and some use both. I know many with CVI have a strategy for everything. And here's an image of Henry using a muffin tin and color bears to work on graphing skills. The muffin tin is one of my favorite tools to use at home. Okay, so I want to close with some highlights from the CVI Now IEP guide that can be found on CVINow.org. Some of you may already be in the thick of the IEP process, while others are just getting started with the IFSP. The IEP process begins at age 3. And I also know there were several questions about the IEP process today, and this guide can be helpful for everyone, even without a CVI diagnosis. So the CVI Now IEP guide, it's a productive, solutions-oriented resource. It's geared towards families, but I also want this to be a space where both families and professionals come together and just get some shared information. It walks through the IEP process from beginning to end. It covers how IEPs are built and implemented and questions to ask and what to expect at each stage. It incorporates CVI considerations throughout. And there'll be articles about transition services. This is for high school and more. So this is a dynamic, evolving resource. And so I just want to share some big takeaways. And we just had a great conversation about assessment, and assessment drives the IEP. And, you know, I wish I truly understood this when Henry was in kindergarten. It was a disaster of a year for him because he did not have a comprehensive vision assessment, a learning media assessment that showed what access looks like for him. And it was just so hard. And I wish if I could go back and turn back time, this would be my priority. Get these comprehensive assessments in so we can figure out what access look like for him, because his behaviors were all across the board. Anyway, so students with CVI require comprehensive assessments, you know, functional vision assessment if there's coexisting ocular impairments, CVI assessments, and there's a growing suite of assessments for CVI, including the CVI Perkins protocol, which you're going to hear again from Marguerite and Ellen. The learning media assessment is so important. Once I had the learning and media assessment in place for Henry, he actually started to learn how to read. He's using both Braille and print, and this has been such a great year for him. Orientation mobility assessment, and assistive technology eval, and so on. Students with CVI, no, I already read that. Present levels must be based on assessment. Goals and objectives must come directly from present level data. Services and placement must be directly connected to goals. Accommodations are the result of data and assessment. And systematic instruction and ongoing data collection is essential, right? Data. Anecdotes without data are meaningless. When we're talking about my child and decisions for him, it must be a data-informed conversation. And parent collaboration is critical. This is totally an understatement. It is essential for the IEP process. And the CVI parent said, just sums up so well. It's about access to learning. The guiding light should be, how do I make this curriculum accessible, right? It's about high expectations and rigorous standards for all kids with CVI. So we continue to center CVI Voices research and what access looks like. Every child with CVI can be a reader, a writer, and a problem solver. And this path will look different for each child, but there is always a way. Individuals with CVI are active participants in choosing their path and defining their own success. We cannot predict what an individual with CVI can or cannot do, but we can thoughtfully design instruction that is accessible and meaningful so they have every opportunity to show us their skills and abilities. So definitely keep, code CVInow.org to learn about CVI, current research, promising practices, and find stories from individuals with CVI and families. And I also wanted to share, we have some exciting news. If you haven't already heard, Perkins will host the CVI Collaboration for Change Conference on June 26th to June 28th. It's in person with some recordings available after the conference. And here's an image of two students with CVI engaging in a book together. I love this picture. So we're honored to convene CVI leaders, medical experts, educators, and parents working toward a common and urgent goal. And, it'll spotlight emerging research in the field and how it impacts our current understanding of CVI. Our keynote speaker is going to be Dr. Michael Chain, the director of the National Eye Institute. It will spotlight promising practices that support access to learning and skill building and independence, firsthand learning from individuals with CVI and families to inform educational medical research, and bold ways to drive policy through medicine, education, and advocacy. And it's been a while since the CVI community has convened, so I'm really, really excited. Families come find connection and community. We're going to have a special breakfast with a family therapist just to talk about the hard stuff. This is tough. This is a tough journey we're on. And educators, come and fortify your work with new research, insight into best practices, and tools that can transform a student's life. Together, we can change the world for individuals with CVI.